All right, we'll call this meeting to order, 1:04.
Great.
Who's doing the minutes? You're doing the minutes? So Chris, if you want to give an introduction to everyone
Sure.
about why we're here, what we're doing?
Yep. So this is one of two things that the electric utility does that's significant. One is establish the revenue that we need to run the utility. And the second is how do we pass that on to the customers in a fair and equitable way. This is the second part of that. This is what we call rate design. It hasn't been looked at in a very long time. It's some of the rates that we charge are kind of antiquated in the context of, you know, new electrification of things, and also the ability to, our ability to, and your ability to see what you're using and when, how much, and make decisions about that based on the rate that's being charged at that particular time or to your particular household or business. In the past, it has been basically, we've never had that capability. Meters read what they read. We read them once a month, and so you'd be charged monthly for the electric usage. There's, as I think most of you in the room know, there's a demand charge if you go over a certain amount, and that amount was set at 9,000 kW kilowatts. That's the, I won't say the speed of power. I kind of try and use water analogies sometimes to explain this stuff. The amount of power you're drawing at any given time. And kilowatt hours is how that power is divided per hour. Sometimes it's the same thing in terms of like kilowatt hours. You're running your typical household, and we'll see some small spikes in the morning and then usually in the afternoon. So there's a curve associated with the demand. The utility has to buy its power based on the highest peak that we see. And in winter, for Ludlow, it's a winter peak. If you go down to Florida, which many of us probably want to do right now, or at least would have wanted to the last couple of weeks, they have a summer peak load, all the cooling and things like that associated with it. We're in a winter peak mode, and it's a combination of, because that's when we use most of our power, but also because that's when most of our population is here too. So it increases. And we have to buy the power necessary to meet that need at the peak. The way we both save money is to reduce that peak and to spread it out over time. Because we have to have the capacity in place for that highest point. When you're not using it, it's not wasted in the sense that you're not using energy at those low points, but you are paying for the ability to use that energy, and that's costly. So this rate design is a combination of things. One is, I think, hygiene. One is to try and fairly and equitably distribute the cost of the utility to its customers. And two, to make sure we're not having any unintended consequences that are not consistent with the policies that the board sets in terms of wanting to, let's say, two things we'll be discussing here. How do you help low income or low users not incur the full cost of that high energy peak? How do you have the users that are incurring that high energy peak actually pay for it? So those are the type of things that are going to be considered here. There are some principles that are generally applied to rate design that are pretty straightforward. They are, try and be fair, make sure you're recovering all the costs that you have for the utility, make sure the utility is being efficient in those costs, we're not passing unnecessary costs on. make sure the classes that you establish and tariffs that you establish within each class are fair and represent the cost to that particular user. When I use the word tariffs, those are specifically approved by the Public Utility Commission for a particular class at a particular energy type, usage type thing. So for residential, for example, we have net metering customers, we have the regular residential customers, we have the residential customers that have been put on demand because of the load that they have drawn. Then in the commercial sector, we actually have 17 different tariffs. I've asked Brett, who will explain in a little bit, what some of those things are that affect the different costs to those commercial users. And then we have 4 industrial users in the utility, and those are fairly easy to predict and manage. I guess I'll stop there and ask if there are questions generally about why we're here and what we're doing. And the other thing I will say is this is going to be a process. This is not going to be the only meeting likely that these folks do. My hope today is to get some guidance in terms of policy direction or level of comfort that the board has, so that we can go back and do some more analyses and come back with information. So I think this is going to be an iterative process. This isn't the only shot. And I think that's it, unless you guys have questions of me about why we're here.
No, I think that covered it. I would just add, context-wise, some of our discussions in the past have been that our understanding, most of this board has only been on this board for a little over a year, well, almost 2 years now. But we've sort of been under the understanding that a lot of these tariffs were designed, these rates were designed in the 70s when we really wanted people to use less power, and we felt like there were peak loads, oil was cheap, we'd prefer people to burn oil instead of use electricity. Now we're kind of in a new world, and we actually want people to use electricity. We'd prefer people to have heat pumps, we'd prefer people to, generally use electric heat more. Again, it's kind of all in waves, it was back then, and then we wanted people to get off that. Now we're seeing a rise in that, and we want to, and so I feel like one of our general thoughts, when we started on this board, was that we want to find ways to not to disincentivize people from using more power. And it feels like our current rate design is to disincentivize people from using more power and having large draws. And we really don't want to structure our rates in that way, generally. Within reason, to some of the context Chris added, just that we do need to manage peak load. We don't want to have peak loads. If we were to max out our capacity, that would cost us a lot more in rates that we pay at the utility scale. And so finding a middle ground there, but not making sure that we're not structuring our rates in a way that it disincentivizes you from having a heat pump and an electric car, I think is a major, it's certainly a major goal of mine, I think a major goal of this board.
For clarification, can comments, how does the audience want to interact with us?
I think it's up to the chair.
Just go through and.
Introduce
your
ourselves.
names and
Oh,
your
yeah,
roles.
that's probably true.
Chris, because
Yeah.
I've had a lot of email exchanges.
Yeah, we'll go around.
Right? Oh, yeah, okay.
I'm Chris Recchia. I'm the department manager. I've been in this position full-time since October of last year, and been working with the board in part-time fashion for the year before that, so.
I'm Brett Sanderson, outside operations manager. I've been with the company going on 11 years.
I'm Shannon Barton. I'm chairman of the board. I think it's been two years, a little
2 years
over.
for you,
Yep.
like you were first elected in March.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Logan Nicole, I've been on the board since, I think it was July 25, so like a year and a half-ish, because there was a vacancy and we needed somebody to fill a seat.
I'm Jean Strong, and I've been on board for
little over a year. And I did run for the office, and here we are.
Yeah.
Okay, so we will take public comments. I just have to do this first. So any consideration of changes, additions, or removal to the agenda? No? No? Okay. And now, number 3, we can move on to public comments. Does anyone have any questions? Okay.
Chris and I have had some context. I've been involved in this town since 1965, okay? You can tell by the color of my hair. And we have a house up on the mountain right next to Burns' farmhouse.
Spalding Farm.
Spalding Farm Road. And I bought an electric vehicle a year and a half ago and installed the Stage 2 charger. And then got my electric bill I got a notice from you in April saying something about changing from X to demand rate. I'm like, okay, whatever, that's
Yeah.
fine. And then I got my bill in May, and
Until
it
you
went
get the bill.
from $27 in 2024 to almost $300.
Yeah.
And I can't take my car to Vermont.
Yeah.
Because I have to go get a job at Home Depot, working weekends to be able to pay for the electric bill. Then Chris, I'm giving more context than probably her background. I talked to Chris and found out that there's the demand rate structure, blah, 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 blah. We went back, I looked at like 9 or 10 years of billing. In every January and February, we breached the threshold. Yet we never got charged this demand rate. And I'm not trying to put anyone under the bus. or
No, it's
whatever.
okay. Just to clarify that, it's got to be 2 months in a row
Yeah,
before
and
we
we
put
had
you on.
January,
So if you have
February,
January,
pretty much, we have a
February, and
hot
then in
tub.
March, it dropped
So,
off,
and,
we
you know,
didn't put you
we're,
on.
The house is used quite a bit, of course, in the winter. So I went back and looked, and it's like, well, we breached for years and never got this demand rate. And I've now learned or educated myself a lot about how this whole thing works. And just here to kind of listen. I'm not suggesting that anything should change. You made the contest that the rates go back to like 1980 when they were building Kettlebrook and everything was electric
Right,
condos.
right.
And I applaud that we really are looking, we're 2026, right? And we're looking at rates that were built and structured back in an era that is really very, very different than where we are today. So to your point, you are, given the rate structure, you're discouraging the migration to a green environment. I think of Vermont as green as can be, right? We got the Green Mountains. And I can't take my car to Vermont. So
Yeah.
I'll be quiet now.
No, and also for context, I want to say that I recently bought an electric vehicle and then plugged it in as well, and I could read the amount of power that it was drawing. And within almost instantaneously, it went up to 11 kW. So the kW charge, when you trigger a demand rate, is based on the highest 15 minutes in a
Yeah.
given month.
Yep.
I immediately hit that, right? And so it's like, to set ours at 9, when a car to charge requires 11 to 12 or something like that, is automatically going to put people.
And I know having the meter, thanks to Brett, they just replaced my meter about a month or so ago, so
Mhm.
we can do more of a MRI type diagnostic as to
Yeah.
When you're-
when the
when you're-
calls, the pull is occurring.
Right.
And I know part of the culprit is we have a hot tub, and at 10 below, it's tough to
It
keep
takes,
that.
it takes a lot. Yeah, I think ultimately the goal is to give us all more data and you all as consumers more information to say, oh, now I can see what's being drawn when and make adjustments. Like, again, trying to help us all reduce that peak that occurs. If you can charge the car at night, if you can heat the hot tub mostly at night, and we will all save money, and we can structure rates to pass that on to you for that extra attention. And now that we're getting smart meters installed, we'll be able to do that. We were never able to do that before, which is kind of what I was trying to say with the clunky meters that we had to read once a month.
Yes.
I'm in the same boat. We actually put solar on our house. We have a very small house in town. And we bought an electric car. I plug it in off hours. I run the dishwasher off hours. I do all the stuff I know I'm supposed to do, and we still go over.
Yeah.
And it's an extra $200 a month minimum, so I can't see us, I don't even know how to get it below 9.
Right. Right now, you probably can't, in the sense that, and also, you're getting no credit whatsoever for plugging your car in overnight versus plugging it in at 4 o'clock in the afternoon.
Right.
That's.
Well, we're not supposed to plug in between 3 and 10.
Yeah.
Well, because we got one of the Vespa
Oh, okay.
meters.
Oh,
So-
okay.
So that's
Yeah.
fine, but it's still, it's drawing too
We
much.
have the peak off-peak structure in Connecticut.
Yeah.
And I've set the car to charge starting at 11 o'clock at night
Yeah.
and go off before 6 a.m. So that, we do our best in Connecticut to work within the structure so that my usage is, I'm pulling at the lowest point when there's demand across the grid.
And that's called, by the way, a time of use rate, and that's certainly something the board can consider in this process too.
And I'm gonna speak for myself, but I'm sure other people are, we're all willing to, especially the full-timers, we're willing to not use a lot of power, say on the weekends during the winter, but we should get some benefit for that.
Okay.
Yes, Alice?
Is this the time for all kinds of questions? Or
Sure.
just sort of thoughts?
This isn't technically under the discussion of rate design and tariffs, so this is really just an open forum for public comment.
So are those off-hour rates still in place? I mean, years ago they used to be. Are they still available?
So the off-hour rates were pretty much for hot water heaters, electric hot water heaters. They did in a peak rate off-hour. Those have pretty much gone away. They go away once the property is transferred or sold. There's a few still left out there of old homeowners that still have hot water, but it was only done for hot water heaters. It
I
wasn't
thought it
done
was
for your
done
regular
clothes
electric.
dryers too, but no.
No, just for electric hot water heaters.
And that's still in place? And what are the hours that you should draw? I mean, say your dishwasher, which is running an hour.
So- Trying to think of the time. The problem is they were all mechanical unless they, made the habit of changing them when the clocks changed. They didn't always become accurate, but,
Over years, it would get off by
yeah, so I mean, it was like
hours.
3 in the afternoon to 5. It would be on, and then 6 to 9 in the morning.
And those were intended to, because for people with hot water heaters that had tanks, right? You could heat the tank and then use the water during the rest of the day. It's not appropriate for a hot water heater that's on demand or even, I'm not even sure how the heat pump versions of hot water heaters work. But as Brett said, there are a handful of people still on those, but it's reducing. And that's not something, well, because we couldn't measure the time, right? It was much more difficult to have that be an effective incentive / disincentive. So, but that's a concept that could be applied now that we have smart meters in place.
So the actual question I came to ask about is not that. On bills, I've been trying for a while to understand not what you're charging, but how the chart works. This little chart here.
Mhm.
I'm looking at this one building, I see I've got 1 commercial unit, 2 residential. And the chart, of course, is different for the residential, that's fine. But the 2 for residential are different charts. And it's like I was trying to compare usage, it's like impossible because I can't figure out how the chart works. Because the chart has different numbers for each one, if you want to take a look.
Different scales? Are they on different scales? May I take a quick look?
Like this is a residential, and look at this chart, it goes up to 750.
Yeah,
This is another residential,
yeah.
it's the same building. The chart,
lower,
the
yeah.
chart goes up to 250.
Yeah. The reason is that a chart for an individual homeowner or a business owner will change, the scale will change depending on the volume that you're using so that you can fit everything on the chart and see it. If they put these numbers onto this chart, it'd all be down here, and you wouldn't see much of a difference. You wouldn't be able to glean the difference. So the scale is different. Like this goes from 0 to 750, and this one goes from 0 to 250.
Yeah.
So it's all by way of trying to make it easier for you to see the bars and see the transition. But you're right, you
What if you
can't,
have good eyes?
you can't take this bar, you can't take that bar and put it on that chart without changing the scale. So does that help you understand
It
it?
does help, I mean, but, look, I mean, you look at this,
Yep.
as a layperson looking at this thing, and say, well, now here's the commercial one, that
Yep.
goes up to 80
Yep,
or 60.
Right.
It's like,
right. And if we put that on the scale of the 200 or 700 on that other one, all the lines would just appear like little blue things on the bottom, and you wouldn't get any information from it. Yeah, so here's the thing, is most people only get one of these. So
So they don't
congratulations, so they don't
they don't
notice
know to
that.
compare.
Right.
okay, thanks. All right.
I have a question just for clarification. When we go to the grid to get the power, is it the grid that sets the threshold of if you exceed the demand rate for 2 consecutive months, effectively then you're put into readiness to serve, and we're gonna have that energy ready for you
Yeah.
for the other 10 months?
Um,
Are those the guys that set the, or is that question I think I'm asking not very clearly is that within your control?
Yeah. The trigger point, the 9,000 kW, or making it some other number, is within the board's control.
Okay.
The bigger picture that I think you're asking about is like, as a whole utility, when we see those peaks occur and when we have to buy power for that, to cover that peak, that's something the utility is obligated to do to make sure that when anybody turns their lights
It's
on, they
there.
get power, right? But that charge and when we pay it is more controlled by it's, tell me if I'm getting too far in the weeds, somebody stop me, but ISO New England, the independent service organization that we have for New England, takes all the power and wheels it around the New England region. They make sure that they've got enough power the day ahead to meet the anticipated load, and that does translate to a charge to us and to all other utilities. And to the extent that they have a peak occur that they weren't anticipating, they have to call on other generators to generate that power, usually very expensive, because generators are going to reserve the most expensive power for last to put on. And that's when our prices can really peak. So it's a combination of the two. We take that big picture and the board tries to then winnow it down into, okay, so how is that fairly applied across the board? So it's kind of combination. The rates are within our control, subject to Public Utility Commission approval. The cost of power, unfortunately, is not in any of our control, and it has, even a week or two ago when temperatures were below zero, ISO New England was seeing peak power that was 55–60% higher than even their highest estimate.
The challenge is you guys have to really level load the factory with the new rate structure such that it is equitable across the entire customer base.
Exactly.
Good luck.
Yeah, and the other thing I wanted to.
Seriously, I mean, because
Yeah.
you were taking from
Yeah.
Peter to give to Paul.
Yeah.
This is just rearranging the deck chairs as
Yeah.
the who gets what. It's a challenge. I feel for you guys.
Yeah, thank you, and
But
it
there
is something I
clearly,
wanted.
think there is, I'm a Six Sigma GE guy, so I apologize. There clearly, there seems to be a defect, and then you go back to 1980, we're talking almost 40 years ago, and it's probably time to take a fresh look at how to level load this factory.
Yeah. So the other thing I meant to mention that I didn't, but you reminded me of it, say, this is a combination of art and science, right? The science stuff, we can give the numbers, we can say how much this costs and where it goes, but ultimately, there is some art here about, okay, what kind of policies are we trying to do? How do we avoid, you can't avoid entirely cross-subsidization, like having industrial pay for some of the residential, or there are legitimate reasons for looking at those things, like, you know, well, who causes our transmission costs? Well, it's primarily the really big users. So that should be weighted toward them as opposed to having it just split up among everybody. So there's that type of decision-making that the board gets to do. I describe this as the fun part. I'm not sure they will agree.
Do you, a quick question, do you guys have an idea of where you'd like to go with the rates at this point?
This is our first meeting on it, so I'm interested in hearing kind of the philosophies behind here. That will help me. Again, I think this is going to be an iterative process, so today is going to be the first time I hear from the board as to like what they like, what they don't like, what they want to achieve in terms of like supporting electric vehicles or supporting low-income households or whatever. So we'll hear that. Then we'll go back and do some analysis and make some proposals back to the board about, okay, if you want to achieve that, here's a proposal. What do you think? So the answer is, I don't know. I have some ideas in my head, but this is really, like I said, the fun part the board gets to weigh in on here and tell us what they want to achieve.
What's the timeframe? 'Cause
Normally, this would take a year to do entirely. I talked to the Department of Public Service yesterday, and they were very excited about the fact that we were doing this, probably more excited than even Dan. They're willing to work with us to expedite this, and if we pick off a couple of the issues and try and deal with those right away, as opposed to like looking at the whole rate, all the rate structures, in other words, utility, commercial, all those things, they're receptive to moving forward relatively quickly.
Do they have to approve the final structure?
The Public Utility Commission does.
Makes sense.
The Department of Public Service are the kind of, if you think of a court, the Public Utility Commission would be the court making the decision. The department would be the prosecutors, like representing the state and the customer interest, and we would be the defendants, you know. Like, so don't take that too far with that analogy, so I want the department's support before I go to the Public Utility Commission with something, because it'll make it a lot easier for everybody, rather than have there be a contested case, which we could do, but I don't see any reason to, based on the fact that the department wants us to succeed, so. The timing, I guess what I'm looking, ideally, our smart meters will be fully installed by,
Hopefully by May,
there you
other
go.
than a few miscellaneous.
I think if we can get these in place by then, or a couple of these in place by then, that would be great for you
That
and for
allows
us.
you, as a board, to be able to truly do the analysis, the analytics necessary
Yeah.
to start to at least lay the foundation of where you want to go.
So one of our challenges right now is a lot of the meters out there only calculate your kilowatt hours used. They don't calculate the demand. So what triggered the demand is if you use 2,000 kilowatt hours in 2 consecutive months, that triggered a demand, so the meter got changed to calculate the demand. With the new AMI, you're gonna find that you're apt to hit that demand without using the 2,000 kilowatt hours. Because everybody's gonna be monitored on the kilowatt, on the demand rate. So they're gonna hit the 9, everybody's gonna hit 9, so now you're in the point that you've got to balance. You know, we can't make money as a municipal, so.
Right, right. I mean, you're squeezing a balloon, no matter what
Right.
you
Yeah,
do.
exactly. That's a good-
It stays the same. The volume
Yeah.
stays the same.
The volume stays the same.
So for the next 6 months, I should charge my car up in Jackson Board?
For the next 6 months, it won't make a difference what time of day you charge it here.
Yeah.
Is the best way I can answer
So I might
that.
as well go up to Jackson Board and leave my car home.
There's a good charging station in Northampton, Massachusetts.
So one other thing, we haven't spoken about the industrial rate, but that's all, it's peak for your whole system. Is that where your peak is?
Yeah,
What
the
I'm
peak
wondering
is,
You know, the two of the big users I can think of are the mine and the mountain.
correct.
And so there was a time, there was a time when, for instance, I think Christmas or Washington's birthday week, when there was an agreement that the mine would shut down for a week. And it would shut down because they knew they were gonna be sucking a lot of power to the mountain. And is anything, everybody think about coordinating between those?
Desiree, you want
Yeah, I
to
mean, I
address
can speak
that?
on that. So that has long since changed.
Yes.
Our demand, our peak demand has doubled since our new processes have been put in.
Ours at the mine.
Yeah, at the mine. And one of the things that we do is we do have communications with OKEMO, in which we know we've shared with them, we don't operate on the weekends, which is always their busiest time, and we don't operate on holidays. Typically, if they're seeing an opportunity to ramp up their load because we're low, they'll reach out to us and say, hey, are you planning on starting anything up, or can we use it? Otherwise, if we are operating on the weekends, I typically reach out to Ed and say, hey, heads up, we are gonna be operating on the weekends. And that kind of helps them plan as well.
So those conversations are happening, and it's a very good working relationship, I think, between the utility and you guys and OKEMO. We're all struggling
That's pretty cool.
with this.
Seriously, that you guys as a community really think as the whole.
And I mean, we continue to do work with Efficiency Vermont quite heavily because we feel it too, just on a much bigger scale.
Yeah.
I know for us, we've seen it as an impact of our corporate headquarters was looking at moving a lot of revenue that we generate to a different operation because they can make it cheaper. So as that continues, we know that that really puts our business on the line, which is jobs for the people in the community and taxes. But yeah, working with Efficiency Vermont, and now we're working with Ludlow Electric too to say where are the places that we can help to cut that peak demand, but also support other initiatives that they're doing, such as the solar field that we're leasing our fields out to for the local development to install that hopefully sooner rather than later, even though all the hiccups that they said. I think that's going to contribute, what, 5?
Almost
Just shy of five.
just 5.
Yeah, under
Yeah.
5, because that would be different if it was 5.
Yeah,
So it's
4.9999 megawatts, and kilowatts, sorry, no, megawatts.
Megawatt.
And the reason, once you trigger 5, then ISO New England takes over the management of that,
Oh.
as opposed to us, so we're trying to,
What do you need?
So it's not 5.
no, they don't turn you off, but they tell you.
They control it.
They control it.
We control it under 5 megawatts, they
Yeah.
control it over.
They control the power, where the power goes, when it's on, when it's off.
Yeah, but what do you guys do when you get to 4.99999?
Yep.
You turn off the field?
Unplug your
Oh, I see. No, that's the.
No, we can sell back.
And that's the
We can sell
difference.
back, but we control that.
It's in the
They-
design of the system.
And you bring up a good point of distinction between what we call capacity, which is what's the size of the generator,
Yeah.
versus what kilowatt hours is it generating. So the capacity, the nameplate of the thing needed to be below 5. It will run at whatever the sun is allowing it to run, and we'll have that power, but will be within our control. And it is size, so it's not likely to go over that threshold, but it could a little bit, and that doesn't affect the distinction, the permitting, right?
This may sound like self-dealing, but I think that as you guys start to structure or think, I would try to encourage, you want to drive the right behavior. And look, and I'm green as, excuse the vernacular, green as goose shit. I really try and think about the environment and everything that I do. And as our society migrates, even though maybe this administration isn't quite pushing us there, electric vehicles are going to take over, right? And I think as a society, we want to encourage people to move away from fossil fuels to electric cars. So just think about that as you're thinking about motivating. What behavior do you want to motivate?
Right.
You want to motivate buying another V8 with a 400 cubic inch engine, or do you want to get more Teslas on the road?
Right. But then we're in a challenging point too to what our system can take and how much load we can put on the system.
I think that's national, isn't it?
Oh, yeah, oh,
Yeah.
You guys buy it, right, so there's only so much you can actually do,
right,
right?
yeah. I mean, our subs can only take so much, and without increase in size and increase in wire size, your infrastructure just,
But also you're subject to the demand of the grid as a whole,
Yeah.
and
Mhm.
those rates change constantly as well, right?
right.
Yeah.
Well, the wind farms off of Nantucket and off the coast help. I mean, that's destined for New England,
Yeah.
right?
It will help. It will help. It'll help regionally, even if we're not buying into those projects specifically, because they are likely to provide winter peak. The wind is going to be blowing probably more in the winter. So they will feed into the grid and lower, they'll increase the amount of energy coming into the grid, which in the supply and demand world should lower the prices, right? Or particularly during the peak, should help mitigate the need to start up more expensive generators. So it should help.
Yes.
Just one other thing. You had mentioned earlier, how do you help low income and low users? And I wonder if you could just elaborate on that.
Okay. So, there are a couple of different things going on when we have in our utility, right? We've got the need to buy the power, which we're basically passing through. And then we have our operating administrative costs. The power is about 75 to 80% of our costs as an overall utility. About 10% is our personnel and, our offices and things like that. And the balance is more of our infrastructure, poles, wires, buying trucks, things like that. Those last two, the cost of running of our staff and the offices and things like that, the prevailing theory is those should all be in customer charges because they're not variable, right? If we take the amount it costs for us to operate the utility and put it into the customer charges, you divide it up among everybody. Generally, that would be about, if you did it just straight across the board, it'd be about $50 a month for the residential customers to cover their share of that cost. In general, people don't like to see a $50 customer charge, right? We're at 10-something. That's something to discuss here, but that's one way that you help the lower income folks by saying, all right, we're going to put more of those costs into the power. So if you're low income and you don't use a lot of power, you actually are being subsidized by the rest of the users to some extent. And the level of acceptability of that subsidy is the discussion, right? How high do you want to make the customer charge versus putting it into power and then recognizing that some of that incremental cost increase is being borne by people who are using more power, but at this, they get the same customer service as anybody. So right? Those are the concepts. So there's one that we do now, is we don't charge the full cost of the customer service in the customer service charge. Two, there's, some of our power comes from the New York Power Authority through hydro in New York. It's called NYPA Power, New York Power Authority Power. It's very low cost to us. We make, as a decision that has occurred in the existing rates, we pass the first 125 kilowatt hours for a residential customer. They get credit at that lower rate. It's like 8 cents a kilowatt hour, as opposed to the 14 or 15 for the rest of it. So if you, again, are, whether you're low income or not, if you're a resident, you get that credit for the first 125 kilowatts. Now, in doing this research and trying to prepare for this meeting, I figured out how much NYPA power we get, and it's really only equivalent to about 89 kilowatts a month. So we're actually giving people, we're subsidizing people in that way too. We're giving people more of the cheap power than we actually get into the system. One of the questions I had for the department, we buy those through the state, through the NYPA power through the state. One of the questions I've asked the department is to look at, can we buy more of that? Because otherwise, we're in a position of maybe having to have the conversation about reducing that first part of the month to what we actually get, as opposed to, giving it away when we're paying for more expensive power. So that's another way that we support low income. And then the third way, which is coming up, is there is a program that VEPSA is doing. VEPSA is the Vermont Public Power something association. It's basically municipal utilities like us that have joined together to try and do power purchases and other things that are more effective on a larger scale. So we work with them, and one of the things they're doing is rolling out an affordability program that I'm not sure how it works yet, but the board has discussed it last month. Jean volunteered. We always volunteer for things we don't know what we're quite getting into. Jean volunteered to kind of be the board's representative on that. We're having our first call on that next week to understand how the program works and what's intended there. I have no idea at the moment of how much rate relief that will provide, but those are a few of the mechanisms that we use. I think one of the decisions for the board is to like say, okay, how much do we want to help the low income and low users and reduce their costs, recognizing that it's the balloon that Dan was talking about. You are going to increase the cost of somebody else. How much is that fair? How much can they tolerate? How does that fit with your principles of what you're trying to do?
Do you have line of sight, the idea that I had thrown out a few months ago is, for those of us who have electric vehicles, do you have line of sight to Department of Motor Vehicle, where you can see, rates or demand's up, let me look, Pengu's got a car registered at that address, I wonder what caused that pull.
Yep.
Okay, so
We
we got an
don't-
electric
No.
vehicle there.
Yeah, we don't. We are guessing at the number of electric vehicles in the territory. We don't actually have a mechanism to.
But if you had
that.
line of sight to that, then you could see it's not an electric space heater. It's an individual who's actually trying to help the environment,
Right,
and therefore, maybe they go to this rate structure.
right. There was
Without guessing, because that information's out there.
Yep, it's just not, it has not traditionally been accessible to us, but that is something we need to get to. There was another program that was established, a pilot program that BEPS is running for electric vehicles to look at the charger, to actually get the data from the charger as to how much power it's using and to charge a different rate for that. We've had 6 or 7 people that have expressed interest, including you, and none of those vehicles are eligible for this
Yeah, my person was
program.
eligible. We were so
Yeah,
excited to
yeah,
sign
and
up,
it-
and I go to sign up, and they say, sorry.
So, and it turns out it's because it's the reliability of the charger recognizing how much power it's drawing is not clear on some of those programs.
So you can look inside of a garage and actually see the charger and what it's pulling.
In theory, yeah,
Big Brother's watching.
yes.
Oh, you don't get away with anything today.
No, you can't, yeah, just,
Free. If you're a resident, you get those charges for free, you sign up for it.
Yeah, that's mine.
so those are usually opt-in programs where the customer is fully aware of kind of what they're giving up in terms of privacy and stuff to have a utility do this. Where my house was in Randolph, it's Green Mountain Power territory, and they have a program where you can do one of 2 things. They'll give you a lower rate if you charge your electric vehicle overnight, and charge you more if you charge it during the day. And then they have a second program where they'll control it. So they'll actually shut it off and not let you charge it even if you needed to.
Connecticut has that in the summer with our air conditioner. You sign up.
Okay.
They turn off my AC when it gets to demand.
Yeah, I'm not quite at that stage where I'm willing to accept the consequences of my own bad decisions in exchange for not having somebody run my life for me. So there's always a balance there, but those programs do exist where you can turn this over to somebody else. And
I have a comment that one of the customers emailed me.
oh, yeah,
Wanted me to
Lisa
review.
has to read this if that's okay.
Hi, my name is Jonathan Liu. I am a Ludlow resident at 68 Sunset View Lane. I apologize for not being able to attend today's meeting in person or virtually due to work and travel commitments. Having previously spoken with the board regarding how current tariffs affect electricity bills, I would like to reshare my concerns as part of the ongoing redesign process. My primary request is the elimination of the demand rate for residential properties. As Ludlow moves towards energy efficiency and electrification, aligning our tariffs with these goals is essential. Our home uses an all-electric approach with efficient Bosch heat pumps. While our overall system is efficient, heating requirements cause short-term spikes in kilowatt demand. Under the current demand rate, Tariff 8, these brief, non-sustained peaks significantly inflate our costs. For example, in January, we used 3,200 kilowatt hours, averaging about 4 kilowatt of demand. Yet infrequent spikes to 31 kilowatt resulted in a bill over $900. Under a standard tariff rate, Tariff 1, this would likely be closer to 600. Furthermore, removing the demand rate would eliminate the need for a separate EV charging rate. With an EV, we are susceptible to additional 10 kilowatt spikes, which can add an extra $170 to our monthly bill, simply for using a climate-friendly vehicle. In conclusion, I ask that the board remove the demand rate base tariff. If that is not possible, I request that the demand rate not apply to residential properties or be modified to use average demands or another metric that more fairly reflects actual usage for homeowners committed to reducing fossil fuel consumption. Thank you for your time and consideration. I am happy to provide further data if needed. He also wanted me to add that if you wanted him, if it would help for one of our customers to write to the state about this, that he would be more than willing to write a letter.
All
I
right,
like
any-
that guy.
Okay, right. You see, I see a pattern. I don't know if the rest of you do.
Okay.
So really, now it's up to the board about how you wish to proceed. I thought, one of the handouts I gave you today was, did I save myself a copy? No, it's okay, I got it memorized. That version, it lays out, so you mentioned, Jean asked a little while ago about, like, would AI help us in any way? Here's the first task. So I asked AI, I said, how do you do rate design? And it came up, and it was actually pretty good. I was like,
It's not
okay.
bad, yeah.
So
I need one of those.
Yeah, I read it.
there is,
Yeah, I have to.
Okay.
so this summarizes kind of the basics of figuring out what your revenue requirement is, which is basically what your operating expenses are, depreciation of, I shut this off, sorry. Now I'm going to really shut it off. Okay. So how much does it cost to run the utility based on your operating expenses, depreciation, and rate on return of things, equipment, and other assets of the utility, and the rate base, which is the net value of the utilities used and useful assets, our trucks, our poles, our wires, our inventory, things like that. And then what you do to figure out the rate design is the stuff we've been talking about here. Generally, you're looking for fairness, you're looking for stability, you're looking for efficiency, to both as feedback to the customers to have them use power efficiently, but also for our operations. And what I guess I could say about that is, it is, well, no, I'll keep going here. Then what you do, and we've already done this, we're prepared to show you some of these. We have a cost of service for the cost of service to run this utility for each class, for each tariff that we have. And then you figure out if that is fair, how it meets your goals, and then you do that assignment. This is part of the efficiency thing. With smart meters, we could set something where I went to each and every customer and told them what their cost of service was. I would tell them what their cost was for the customer service charge, the cost of getting the electricity in the particular time that they were using electricity. But that level of detail is impractical, right? So what you're doing from then to the present, to a big picture, where I just took the total costs and just dumped them on everybody equally, somewhere in there is a sweet spot where it makes sense to provide the breakdown to different classes, and it's not too onerous to administer. That's kind of the combination and the place you're trying to get to. So once you have the cost of service, you then apply that in lumps that are still fair, but recognize you're trying to be also efficient and administratively able to handle that. The other concepts are to, add in things that you're concerned about, like hearing about wanting to get away from fossil fuels, wanting to support electric vehicles, wanting to support low income. There may be others that you have, but those are typically the standard ones. And ultimately, some of them are more typically allocated to the customer service charge, like I was talking about, like administrative costs of running the utility. Some of them are more appropriately linked to the cost of power. And those usually cover not only the cost of power, but usually the cost of transmission, the cost of distribution, which is once we get the power into our system, how we distribute it. So those costs typically are allocated to the power cost, to the cost per kilowatt hour. That's pretty high level description of kind of what you're trying to achieve here. Then I wanted to look at our existing tariffs. What you need to understand is we've got tariffs, we got 6 or 7 for residential, basically distinguishing between net metering and not non-net metering. So really it's 3 that are the rate 01, the standard residential, rate 03, which is the demand residential, and then the water heater rate 02, which is the water heater 1, which is relatively minor. For commercial, we've got 17 or 18 different tariffs. And this is where Brett comes in, because a lot of these are related to costs that we incur to deal with different commercial customers. Now might be a good time to switch over to talk about what costs we incur. I'm trying to get the board to have a general understanding of the differences between like 3-phase, 1-phase, CT meters. What's the effect on the utility such that they should consider
all-
those costs?
Cost balance, I guess it's more cost balance, so depending on where the components fall before or after the meter, anything that falls before the meter is typically on our expense for maintenance and repair costs, so if we supply in a single phase or a 3-phase, it separates it. If it's before the meter, the transformers, our cost, so if it fails, we pay. If it's after the meter, it's usually the industry or whoever it's up to maintain. Same thing that happens with the metering devices. There's current transformers that actually calibrate, run the figures for the meter. They're a pricey component. Take a 3-phase, there's 3 of them, 1 on each phase. It transfers the reading back to the meter on what's being drawn. So that's really what kind of breaks all those categories out on what rates are being charged for.
So telephone poles, for example, are,
Utility
that's
poles.
a utility. That's right. Speaks for itself, doesn't it? Oh,
Yeah, but in some instances, that could be customer owned too. Like Magris put in a big structure after their meter. They paid and installed all that themselves, and they maintain all that themselves.
Any questions?
Well, we're, do you know what percentage of the revenue that currently comes into the pot is coming from the demand rate? Is it 1%? Is it 20%?
Michael?
Commercial demand or residential?
Residential.
Residential demand, okay. So if I can tell you here in a second.
Trying to get an idea of the magnitude of.
If you did away with it, what it would.
Break out residential, commercial, and industrial, just in those big categories. Total, it's evenly split. It's 33% across each category for revenue.
So 33% of the total revenue of Ludlow Electric comes from demand rate.
No, from
No.
residential.
From residential.
From residential, okay.
Yeah.
Now, of the residential,
It's about 30%.
about,
It's about 30% too.
the residential demand is pulling in 20% of the total residential.
So it's a big number.
It is.
20% of 33%.
Okay.
And
I was wondering if you're.
in terms of numbers of users, so we have about, 2,700.
Residential.
What's it, residential is
And 242 residential.
and 242 demand, so it's about 10% of the residences are hitting
Quantity.
demand.
That's
Hmm?
all.
In
In-
20% of the revenue.
Right, so the,
That's not an easy number to spread out and hide.
right, correct.
They use 20% of the residential power.
Yeah.
So it's a fair distribution of the revenue
Yeah.
compared to the power they're using, yes.
So a lot of the demand users are having high KWHs also.
Yes, they are.
Whereas like I'm a low KWH.
But you
I-
have those spikes,
But I have
yes.
the spikes.
Yeah. And,
Dan, I think, is in the same category as you, is he not using the high usage, but you
Right.
have those spikes.
Yeah.
And that's what's,
It's like a dog collar, you hit the invisible fence, it gets zapped.
So you had your spreadsheet up on the screen.
It's
Can you share that
interesting
again?
how
That was actually
it's
really
almost
interesting.
equally
So-
divided.
what the board has before them, and we're going to put up here, is a spreadsheet showing the total revenue we get from each of the tariffs, which are split in terms of resident, commercial, and industrial.
Is this based on the new rates?
It is. It includes the new rates,
now this is a revenue, not cost.
not expensive, right, expenses, right. So the distinction is, this is based on the money we're bringing in under the new rates and how it's paid for by the different accounts.
What's the
You
what's the
can-
total?
Sorry,
Sorry,
what?
what?
What's the total on the far end?
The total on the farm end is 9.3 million. We
Oh,
can
okay.
show it there.
Okay, it's
Um,
small,
If I scroll over this way,
Yep.
our total residential revenue was 2.88 million. Our total commercial revenue was 3.19. Industrial was 3.3 million, for a total of $9,396,000.
So $10 million in residential represents 23% of that.
Yeah, the reason Michael said 33 roughly was because you're right, it's a little less for residential and a
And
little
then
more.
going back to the demand piece of the residential, go back up top of the I'm gonna round it 3 million.
Yeah.
Where's the demand?
These are the demand customers right here.
300.
Total of
So-
396,000, just under
Yeah.
400,000, where our regular residentials are
Yeah, so it's
1.9 million.
So what's the 529,000?
Demand charge.
Down and to the right.
To the right.
529,992, yeah.
That's the
Oh,
Reso
sorry, I
3
didn't take
demand
that.
charge.
I didn't take that
Yeah,
into consideration.
Yeah,
those
so
three.
what's our number there? 902, so it's.
925.
So it's about a third of the 2.8.
2.3.
Yeah.
Wow.
So can we, before we get into too many of those deals,
Yeah.
let me draw your attention to the left side of this,
Okay.
because this is an important consideration. Accounts, some people have more than one meter, so that's why the account number is higher than our actual number of people.
So
So
those
you
are the
see,
solar.
so you see we have 3,271 accounts, right? And 3,029 are active, meaning that column is more accurate to think of individual people, right? And businesses and things like that.
Footprints? Footprint.
Yeah, and so what you see there is that for net metering, we have about 8 plus 6 is 15, 16 customers on net metering.
That's all?
That's it.
I thought it'd gone up.
We have 2,739 customers on Reso 1. And then we've got about 16 water heaters, that's Reso 2. That's it. And then for the Reso 3, which is the demand rate triggered, we have 242. So you can see that 242 is about 10% of the other residences.
But of the dollars coming in, you've got 900,000
Correct.
of 2.3 million was total res?
2.8.
2.8. Yeah,
So it's
yep.
it's
So it's
33%.
Right, so you can see, right,
Yeah.
for most of our residents, we're bringing in 1.9. Michael, I'm sorry, could you go back to that side
Oh,
for a
yeah.
second?
Shows it right here.
Yep, So 1.9 million for residential straight Reso 1, and then the 925, yes, so it's a considerable,
It's about a third.
it's considerable more, but
Chris, I know you changed, like, whatever, you found out that we really should have been a demand for years. How many of those hidden in the closet, so to speak?
yeah. So it's an interesting thing because,
And if I'm
because,
going into sensitive territory.
no, you're not. I mean, all of this is open, and I hope you appreciate that there's, you said it's hard to hide, you know, when we're not, nobody's trying to hide anything, but you're right. Some charges are more acceptable when they're spread out over a large number of people versus a few that are maybe incurring those charges. But to answer your question, I'm going to describe it this way. You know that demand can be triggered by two ways. It can be the 9 kW, or it can be over 2,000
Yep.
kW. A lot of our meters, as Brett said, were not demand meters. They only read the kilowatt hours. So we never had people on
Now
demand.
you have line of sight to both measurements.
And so as we're putting these meters in, we're seeing more, I'm like, oh God, you know, how many people are going
Do
to
you
hit
have life
demand?
insurance, by the way?
That's a
Okay,
whole
so
other
you-
story,
so more
but
and
yeah,
more, as you flip out, you're really gonna get a true line of sight as to.
which is another
And that's
reason,
another thing for this tariff
Yeah.
rate case is
this is
But
why
that
we
by
want to do
itself,
this.
well, mathematically, the balloon isn't changing the size. So if you just find out a lot more, by default, the per user rate has got to fall.
Yeah.
Am I making sense?
Yes, so can I just ask a point of clarity? So in the tariff, it talks about 15 kW. What is that? Because
it's a
that's-
ratchet.
Yes.
What's that mean, ratchet? Does that mean another?
It's another, so some of our friends here, the commercial, Magris is in both the demand and a ratchet. And what that means is that once they hit the demand and they're in that, we charge them, rather than charging them at that peak demand all the time,
Yeah.
we're generous and charge them 85% of that peak for 12 months. So no matter what they do, they can't go backwards to like a regular rate that didn't trigger that demand. I don't think, you're not in that situation, but there is a ratchet component, which is another whole concept we should talk about, where once you trigger demand for a period of time, there's this smoothing of that curve by charging 85% of it. But if you're below, like if your bill actually for a given month was below that 85%, you'd still pay that 85% because sometimes you'll be over that. So it's a mess.
Yeah, okay.
That sounds
I'll
fair to
describe
me.
it that way.
Brett, as you install these meters, though, you're gonna have, I'm guessing, you're gonna have hundreds of people falling into the demand piece.
This is why we wanted to do this
This is
process.
why we're doing this.
This is why we're here,
Full
yeah.
360-degree view of what should have been done for
Right.
decades.
And this is why
And I
we,
think that's really the critical point, where the board can only then start to think about reallocating. Until you have full 360-degree view, you're guessing.
yeah, well, we got enough of a view now that
Yeah.
we anticipate that problem, and we are trying to get ahead of it a little bit. But as I say, we'll have all the meters in May. We're already getting, we've got half the meters in now, so we're getting data, right? It's a random half, but we're getting data, and we'll have all the data. And that's why the effectiveness of this, if we can have it ready to go by then, rather than start in
Gotcha.
May
Yeah,
and
okay.
say, oh, another 6 months to figure this out. But we do anticipate, and certainly we're seeing that some of the, now that we're putting the new meters in, we're seeing that. We're also seeing something which we don't have a handle on yet, but from a consumer standpoint, the good thing about the old meters is they slow down over time. So some of these meters that are 50 years old, I think that's another shoe to drop for the customer is when we get accurate information about how much they're actually
Well, you
using.
can blame me, I work for GE Meters.
I'm gonna,
so-
okay, we will. Thank you, Dan. So I think it's a
Maine, New
two,
Hampshire.
so I think good data is good, but accurate data is gonna cause some anxieties that we're trying to anticipate here and get ahead of. The other thing I wanted to note about the the commercial classes, you see all those different rates. Most of them are in comma 1. But then you've got a bunch of different things, probably on what Brett was describing, whether they're three-phase, whether they're single-phase, whether they're customer-owned equipment, or whether they're our equipment, whether they are having different types of meter classes. So those all result in a different tariff. And I, for one, when looking at this, when I see one or two people in a given class, would like to see those somehow, see if we can consolidate those. And I think the department is also very supportive of trying to do that. I think the concept was that, and Brett probably explained this, is that based on those different equipments and where they're located, they cost us a different amount. And some of the meters are very expensive, some of them are standard costs, and it can range. And the concept was to recover those costs accurately from those incurring those costs. But again, it gets to the difference between precision and workability that we're going to have to find. So right now, having, one or two customers in a particular rate class is, in my mind, more problematic administratively than it's worth to.
Less is more.
Yeah. What we would do going forward is to convert this into our actual expenses. So Michael mentioned that this is based on our revenue, and because we just did a rate case, we're pretty confident that the amount of money we're bringing in under that is equal to the cost of our service. So that's an easy way to do this. But we do have other expenses that should be identified and really we should be doing this at expense versus cost rather than revenue versus the cost of service, if that makes any sense at all.
Do you have the accurate data, standard costing is what you're talking about here. So
Mhm.
do you have the accurate data traps set up so that you can really get a good line of sight as to what it costs to service that population?
I believe we do. I don't
That's
think.
critical.
I think we have the data. I don't think we've analyzed it as in as much detail as we will in this next month or so. But I think this is a pretty good representation. And we do have that data, and we can get more precise about it.
You find out you've got customers that's actually losing money if you have good cost capture.
Yeah. So, where is it going? I think that in terms of the data, we've got the ability to do a couple. We can turn things on, off. If we, for example, we went through and said, if we eliminated the demand rate for residential and put everybody just into the straight residential pot, I believe there were two things. If we did that entirely, the rate would actually go down.
No.
Yeah, this is where I get in trouble.
Yeah. If we took everybody that's in a residential pot now and put them into one rate, the cost per kWh would go up to 19 cents for everybody across the board. Currently, the Reso 1s are paying 14 cents per kWh. The residential demands are paying 10 cents per kWh. So everybody would go up to 19 cents per kWh, but your demand part of your bill would go away.
You're just spreading the pain across
Yep.
everyone in that pool.
Yep.
Right.
The res rate.
But there are some people who are, some small houses who are using very little kWh, but they would be paying a higher bill.
Yeah.
That's the thing you have to think about, is that some of the smaller places.
So if, could you just increase the KW to a certain reasonable amount?
You could.
Because if we've got heat pumps and the car.
Yep.
And that's what, apparently, the
Yeah.
car is probably what.
So one of the things we were thinking of, and I started that process last fall because I was concerned about this, but I was out over my skis, to use an Okemo term. I was thinking, okay, let's just for a little while we'll change it, instead of 9 and 2,000, change it to 12 and 2,500 or something like that, and pick a random thing along that path. And it was going to be more complicated with the PUC than it was worth. And also, we weren't going to be revenue neutral because I wasn't changing the rates at all. And so we were going to be losing money through that process just to be able to postpone the discussion that we're now having. And so we said, no, let's just do this right once. And so that is definitely an option for the board to consider, is instead of eliminating the demand rate, you could raise those thresholds. You could eliminate the demand rate for some. You could take the people that are, the 272 that are in the demand rate now, you could put them on a time of use rate and say, this is gonna be the charge during peak hours, and this is the charge overnight. And then with the smart meters, you as customers will be able to say, oh, okay, I'm gonna dial in my car to do it overnight, or I don't know what type of control you have over heat pumps, but similarly, you could make decisions to do that, or hot water, and level it more that way. There's a lot of options here, and I think this is a good discussion, but at some point, the board has to give some instruction, okay, I feel good about this, or I feel bad about that, and and then we can go do some more calculations.
Right now, the KW, the 9,000 KW, that's punitive.
Yes.
I mean, if you go over 15 minutes in a whole month, like for us, it's $200 a month, it's almost $3,000 a year more for my power.
And it hits you for the year, regardless, right.
So that's
And
not,
and as I
that's
said,
not 300, it's 3,000.
mostly, I think it was designed when
I can do
things were,
Yeah.
I think it was designed when appliances were using things pretty steadily over the course of the day. Some exceptions, your dryer, your oven, whatever, but they weren't, but the thought in this was along those lines, not that you plug in a car to charge and it's sucking in 10,000 watts immediately. And that's what it's doing.
Mike, just some experience, guys. You're gonna piss people off, okay? No matter what you do.
No matter what you do, you're not
And
gonna.
I'm gonna relay an experience that we had at GE. 25 years ago, there were multiple currencies all across Europe, right? You had lira, you had pounds, you had francs, and as a result, and everything went to the euro. So now you could say, in Italy, it costs 3,000 lira for a light bulb. Well, guess what? Everyone now can see, when we went to a euro, what the cost was. The variation between Spain and Italy and France was huge. Like, what are we gonna do? It's costing $8 for a light bulb in Italy and $4 in Spain for the same damn light bulb. And everyone's now gonna be able to see this. And we just said, look, we're gonna go to one friggin' price. Everyone's gonna bitch, some are gonna be happy. And it was about 6 months of adoption, and all the noise went away.
For what to charge a light bulb.
What to charge the light bulb.
And it's the same concept.
We started contortioning, you're gonna do this in Spain, this in Italy, this in France, this in Austria. And it's like, you'll end up like an octopus, but you need 100 arms to try to do your job every day.
Yeah.
We just said simple is the easiest way, paying for a period of time, move on.
We still gotta try to control it. Still gotta try to control the use so it doesn't get too carried away. You know, if you don't
Sure.
have no limitations, then they're just gonna freaking.
But you're squeezing a balloon, I mean, you're not changing, the same thing in our light bulb, we're not changing the demand or whatever. But
Yep.
But I would appreciate it if we get to a decision within a reasonable period of time, because I have to decide, I have a lease on my electric car. It's like, do I get another electric car?
I
Or
see.
do I go back to burning fossil fuels
Yeah.
again?
And therefore, I think to move this along, we need to start the discussion with the board and hear how you want us to proceed.
I'll be
because-
quiet.
A couple more, if I can sneak one more
Yep.
question. The meters that you guys are going to, will they, and I'm using terms that I'm not 100% on, would they support like a virtual power plant where folks with their electric cars could use the batteries to push back into the grid on peak hours?
Not right away,
No.
is my understanding, but that's another technology that we are planning for in the future.
Yeah.
That is another, I mean, I defer to Brett, but I think 5 years away. That would be the,
The battery project.
no, that's the, what's the other name of that system? The distributed power.
Yeah, so.
Oh, Powerwall, are you thinking like batteries or?
I feel like we talked about this other technology that we're gonna, that allows us to control batteries at residential scale.
Oh,
Oh.
it's something GMP is doing.
GMP's doing
it. Yeah.
They're doing it with Powerwall's, essentially a battery, right? That you can charge during the low hours and then discharge. And again, kind of Big Brother-ish, GMP was putting them in for free to your house if you wanted one, but they wanted to be able to control it. So they could actually reach in and say, we're going to charge it now, and we're going to discharge it when it helps reduce the load. So yeah, you can get to that level of sophistication. Not sure, Logan, I still not placing where the conversation you're thinking of, but we were looking at larger batteries to help with load that Ludlow Electric could control. Okemo was thinking of doing a 3 megawatt, for example. And if we can charge that during off-peak time and then discharge it when the peak is there, you shave that off the whole load. That saves us all money. But I don't know if there were other.
Forget what there's another, it's in our capital expenditures for next year or the year after. We had talked about some sort of system, I forget what the, there's an
Oh,
acronym.
SCADA, are you thinking
Oh,
of the
SCADA.
SCADA
Oh,
system?
SCADA.
Oh, yeah, okay, that's, yes. That's an
That's
upgrade.
just a monitor.
It's a monitoring thing. It's an upgrade to our existing system. It's why Okemo can talk with Magris, because we've got the same, we're seeing
Seeing the
all
actual load.
all
at
the
time.
Yeah.
loads, the actual load for several users, the key two big industrial users, plus our substations right now, and we're gonna upgrade that system to be more accurate and to also be able to
Solar field. if it-
help do the solar field in some other places, right? So
Yeah.
that's a monitoring thing, though. It's not it will give us information, but it
Not
doesn't tell
active
us what to
management.
do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, I thought there was
But-
more management involved.
And then your concept of using the electric vehicle as a battery that is possible.
Certain vehicles, not all.
Right, but but you kind of, it's like if you're charging it at night, and then we want you to discharge it during the day when it's peak, it's probably when you're driving your car. So there's only so much you
Yeah.
can get out of that.
Yeah, I mean, I think the idea would be that long-term, if we could
Talk about efficiency.
have some sort of program similar to GMP where we're installing power walls
Mhm.
or battery systems for people, and then they give us some ability to control their,
Yep.
and help with peak shaving on a, you know,
Well, even if not,
Yeah.
if the power just comes back out, maybe you guys don't control it, but it should, I don't know how you would build the cost structure, but just to lower the cost coming in to the town at those peak moments so that everybody gets a lower cost
Yeah.
ultimately, however that works.
We're also working on a project at both the office, the electric office, and Sunoco, correct?
Yep.
For charging stations. And I think Sunoco's,
Yep, so we're doing one at the office to support the town. There's a grant program for EV charging, and the town wanted to put them here at the town hall, but there wasn't spaces that they owned. Turns out they don't own the parking spaces, it sounds like. So, and we ended up, the office at 9 Pond Street's gonna host those, and that's paid for, that's gonna be paid for by a state grant. In addition to that, you know that there are fast chargers around various places, but Sunoco Station has expressed interest until I told them that the cost of one of those stations was $60,000, and they were trying to figure out how many lifetimes it would take to make that money up. And then it turns out that Tesla just supported a new program where the company we're working with will put it in for free, actually pay Sunoco a monthly rent, and do it all costs in. So now they're interested again. In fact, if they were going to get rent, it was like $135 a month they were going to get paid. They're like, can we make all our parking spaces electric vehicles? So there's dynamics there going on about getting additional charging stations in. But if you're an electric vehicle owner, you know that those costs are usually pretty expensive to charge for a half hour. It's usually between 45 cents and 75 cents a kilowatt hour to do it in one of those stations. So you want to charge at home is, basically.
There's
what
two fast chargers behind the mountain thing.
Main and Mountain.
They're expensive.
They're very expensive, but
And
they don't work.
They don't work.
Yeah.
Right. They're
and I
very
was
cheap.
wondering- I was
They're very
wondering
cheap that way. I've
if,
plugged into them and it
Yeah, I
doesn't-
know, the cost per kilowatt hour is zero.
Yep.
Because I've been there 3 times just trying to make sure I know where I can go get a charge besides my garage. And were those shut off as a result of economics, or they just don't work?
Unfortunately, as I've explored this with the charging companies that provide the chargers, they're usually owned by the property owner. There's no requirement that they be maintained. They often, if they fail, there's often, I tried to get in touch with, I think
It's EVgo.
no, it wasn't EVgo on those, the Blink.
Blink.
You can't get them on the phone.
Yeah.
I mean, to even tell them that the thing's not working, let alone get any help. So that unfortunately is a problem that you don't know whether the chargers that are showing up on your list of chargers nearby actually work or not.
You know,
If you need a fast charger that is working, that I know is working, Benson's Chevrolet has one.
Is that right outside the garage then? That's a
Yeah.
fast charger?
Yeah, it's right outside their garage. So anyway, I don't know how we got off on that. So we're trying to support electric charging by providing chargers, but there's no place like home, Dorothy. And, no matter what you pay at home, even the demand charge is still going to be a lot cheaper than going to those places. But I agree with the concept. The problem is that in the old days, when the appliances were generally, pretty level in terms of what they were using, or they were lower demand, it's very different than plugging in an electric vehicle that immediately, like in the first 15 minutes, will be at 10 kW. So,
yeah, I mean, to the demand conversation too, just those, I know those chargers, it's a small business, obviously, a local resident, and, the second somebody plugs in, he's in a demand rate.
Yeah, that's-
And so that
I thought the
has,
reason why they were not
that has
operating was
influenced
because it was
his
costing
decision
too
whether
much use.
to, I think that has likely influenced his decision to upkeep them.
Makes sense.
Yeah, we did, I know of another customer,
That
a
makes
commercial
sense.
customer that ratcheted, sorry to use that word, but went down to limit their chargers, even though they were fast chargers, to limit them to 2.5, 2,500 watts at a time, and you could be there, you'd be there for a week to charge your car.
Yeah, I know that happened that's the case in Proctorsville too.
Yep.
They have those chargers that are by the post office. And they made it so that only one of them would work, because if two people happen to plug in at the same time, they got into a demand rate, and then they weren't charging enough for the power, and they were giving the power away at a loss because of the demand rate.
This has all gotta change, because I even did some
Yeah.
research,
Yeah.
like, why can't we have chargers like in the Vermont Welcome Center at exit 2? Like, why don't you put 10 chargers in there? And I found out that's federal land.
Yeah.
And federal land will not allow any commercial activity to be put on it, which is completely contrary to the incentive of moving people to electric vehicles. They'll
Right.
pull in,
Yeah.
go get a Diet Coke and charge for 20 minutes.
Yeah.
Right.
Anyway,
There are all sorts of things we're finding out, and, yeah, and we need to be, we need to try and predict as many of those unintended consequences as possible, but we're not going to get them all.
No.
But we can certainly get closer to than where we are.
yeah, I think we're moved well into that.
Yeah.
Item 4.
So I think, I don't know if you guys want to discuss among yourselves your thoughts, or share with us what kind of your philosophies are, or how you want us to proceed. I know that's kind of a little open-ended and not as guided as normally we would get to, but that's kind of where we are.
I just got a couple of minor questions on the chart. When I see lights, just explain to me
Sure.
what that is.
Streetlights,
I
they take
thought so.
electricity.
I assumed
Yep.
that. but
Most of
just
them are,
wanted-
town streetlights.
Okay. But
Some
so-
of them are owned by customers,
Okay, can see that.
parking lots,
Okay.
things like that.
And the other thing is solar credit,
Mhm.
which seems to be pretty minor, at least at the top part of this chart.
Right.
How might we increase that? Only if people
That's
have more
Yeah.
solar.
So the net metering is state regulated, so we have to, they set the chart, they set the payment that we make
Okay.
for that. Because solar penetration throughout the state has been pretty significant, they've reduced that incentive over time. But it's still, there is still some benefit. You do get paid for generation that you put onto the grid at a slight premium. But eventually, I imagine it's going to get to a one-to-one thing where the power you use, you pay for at a particular rate, and the power you sell at the same rate. So there's a net. It really is truly a net thing. In terms of encouraging more, a lot of this is really dependent on people's homes, their siting, their ability to put solar on. Didn't help that tax incentives went away. And also community solar that the state had, where let's say you're in a downtown and you can't do a bunch of solar, you could buy into a project that was somewhere else. They've eliminated that, unfortunately. I think it was, I don't know why, but it was not workable for them. So I'm not sure how you incentivize at this point people to do more solar.
Okay.
Well, and solar is tough here. I mean, the majority of the homes probably still have slate roofs, or, the sun goes down at 4:30.
Right.
So.
4.3
Uh-huh.
4.3 hours sun per day.
And, 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 of course, it's opposite of our peak, right?
Yeah.
Is
Right.
when solar is producing the most. So really, the wind is actually more coincidental with our
Right.
peak demand in terms of renewable. So maybe the offshore stuff will help, but.
We'll put some turbines on the mountain.
Well,
Turn
it's
some
something to
heads.
consider depending on what your appetite
mean-
is for,
We'll have 100 people at our next meeting.
yes, you will.
Say that out loud.
We'll get a
That'll
big-
get the people to
we'll
show
get a
up.
bigger venue for you.
You gotta be careful.
I'm joking, I'm
Birds
joking.
it's gonna kill, right?
Yeah.
They've been working on that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I'm curious what the, if we have, I feel like some of the questions that I had coming into today were answered, just through our discussions. Yeah, I was hoping to whittle down a little bit more on some of these rates. I was curious, I mean, obviously I've read through these things, but I still don't really understand why why the different rates. I was hoping for some more background just on the logic of them. I think most of this discussion, most of the people I feel like we've heard from on the demand rates are the people with the net metering, which makes sense because they have meters that allowed us to see that they were using above the 9 for a moment or whatever reason. And that's how they got into the demand rate. So it sounds like these are, I mean, both of them are part of the 6 people on our chart. Am I right in the way that I?
The net metering demand,
Net
yeah.
demand.
Mhm.
I'm just trying to put some like faces to context to, you know, like the numbers on this chart. And so I also, I guess just in that way, I want to make sure that when I'm thinking about this and what I want to adjust hits the populations that I expect that it does.
Well, the demand rate's gonna be your biggest thing,
Yeah.
because once all these AMI meters are in,
Oh, yeah, that's going to go up. I mean, I fully expect those numbers to climb. It's one of the reasons that I'm worried about this. That's one of the reasons I want to attack it. I guess that was my other question, really, was just, remaining question was some of these other COM 3, COM 4, COM 5.
So those are all iterative because of they're all under rate 7, which is in your book.
Oh,
right?
all right.
But because
That's what I
each
thought.
one, so when you look at rate 7,
Yeah.
you'll see it says, for example, it starts out with a customer charge of $54 a month. First 5 kW is $14.09. Additional kW is 19.4. The energy charge is a little 10 cents, right? That starts there, but when you look toward
Yeah, then if
the
you
back
have,
and you get to customer-owned equipment, all customers with 3-phase power are going to be at $102 a customer charge instead of the 54.
instead of,
And then-
not in addition to.
And then, right, and then if you have a CT meter, you're subject to a different charge. And if if you have customer-owned equipment and
All right, so
your
that's how you get
three-phase,
to, this is really COM 7A, COM 7B, COM
Exactly,
7C,
exactly.
COM 7. All right. That makes sense.
And this is an example where you have customer charges for that class of customers. You've got customer charges ranging from the $54
For different pieces of equipment.
up to $700 and something.
And then
a month.
A or B, depending on whether they have 3-phase or single-phase.
And just to clarify, there are 17 different commercial rates, but not all of them are being used. So you can see it skips some of the COM rates in here.
Yeah, that's what I was confused by,
I had that
again.
question, what's
There
why
are set
their
up in our
numbers
system, but they're
missing.
not currently being used. So those can, I think we could easily whittle down to a much lower number of commercial rates.
Kind of consolidate. And so then, within each class, we have, I mean, I guess except for industrial, but within the residential and the commercial, all these are net metering. Was that net metering and then net metering group? And then net metering demand?
The initials, Michael, for that beginning?
NM
Yep.
is net metering. So the first 4 rate classes are the net metering classes for commercial customers.
Can you explain the GG, the N?
Yeah, is that net metering group?
GG is gross generation,
Oh, all right.
net, and U is net usage. The UD is net usage demand. So now that's a regular demand customer on a commercial rate. And then the G is just generation, not gross. So there's 4 different categories where we categorize their usages.
Net metering generation,
We
net
have to do
metering
that
gross
for net
generation.
Right. The question is, do we need, right, what are they and do we need them
Net
to be
usage.
separated?
Well, those we do need because of our calculation
Yeah, yeah.
of net metering.
Yeah, my understanding would be we would, because it depends on how whether they net give power back to us or net use.
Right, yep.
And then if we're gonna look at the demand charge within those, that's the demand, those are the demand rates
And we
there.
also have to charge EEC on their gross usage. So if they generate the power and use it in their house, they still have to pay EEC
Yep.
on that usage.
Yeah, because that all goes
We
to
don't get
efficiency
billed for
Vermont.
it, But we have to charge EEC on it.
Yeah, because we're still paying out to efficiency Vermont.
Right.
Yeah,
The conversation we've had on residential demand applies to commercial demand as well. You
Yeah.
can see most of our customers in commercial are triggering the demand charge, right? Well, that's not fair. We got COM 01 at
These
5,
COM 1 through 4 are non-demand.
right, so that's about 600.
Yep.
And then below that line, you've got,
yeah, another
COM
100.
5
Yep,
through COM 12 is our demand commercials.
so that looks to be about 120, 130, something like that.
yeah.
140.
Yeah, 140 looks like. Yeah, I guess that was maybe just a misunderstanding that I had, but that's that net metering, so that NMND at the top of the residential rate, that's the net metering,
Demand net.
people that have triggered the demand charge.
Yeah, with the D.
But they're still covering, and that's why I put
And so
the
that's
plus
part of-
sign after them in our tariff,
Yep,
because they're covered by our net metering tariff and our residential.
but then
rate
they've
8 tariff.
triggered,
So they fall into 2 tariffs.
and then the Reso 3 is the other one that's been, like a lot, obviously, most of the conversation that we've had
Yeah.
comes back to that, but most of the people that have actually come into this building to talk to us have been that net metering demand.
I think it's because they see that
Well, because they're generating and they,
once they plug the vehicle
they're
in,
not, yeah.
they, and that's why they're here.
It's not
right?
triggering the 2,000.
Right.
These are people that have actually triggered the 9,
Yes, I think that's
for the
true,
most part.
for the most part.
And now something else you don't see in here, and under the industrials, we have 4 different industrial customers. We actually have 8 different industrial rates. None of the other 7 are being used.
Because we only have 4 customers.
Right. And industrial is defined by the state, anybody over 1,000 kW is considered an industrial customer.
All right. Yeah, I mean, again, that's most of the questions that I had, I think. I am curious what our goal is for today. I feel like my thoughts are, my opinions on this mostly haven't changed. I feel like we should basically just get rid of the demand charge. How that affects the other rates, I'll leave that to people with the Excel spreadsheets to tell me.
I don't think you want to get rid of the demand, though.
Well, I think that's what I'm looking
For the
for today.
residential demand.
To answer your question about what I hope to get out of this today would be those type of thoughts so that we can go back and do analysis and say, okay, if you did get rid of residential demand rate, here's what the impact would be on the residential rates across the board. Or if you set a different trigger, we
Yeah.
could give you iterations like that.
Yeah, and we've seen those in the past. I think my general philosophy, to come back to just like basic thoughts, I think that the demand rate itself is an idea that we don't want people to use power, or we don't want people to use power at certain times, I guess, to an extent. But, you know, it's not using any hourly usage, so it's not really like a peak shaving mechanism on its own.
Right.
I think I would like to see us, I mean, as we develop I think that that's my interpretation, is that the demand rate is us saying, we don't want you to use power. We want you to limit your own usage, and if you don't, then, like, here's the stick. We're gonna hit you in the shins and stop using power.
Yep.
And I don't agree with that as a philosophy. I would like to see us get rid of that, because I think we do want people on a whole to, we don't want to disincentivize people from getting electric cars. Not that we're incentivizing them, but we certainly don't want to disincentivize it. And so I think that's where I come at it from. I want to see what it looks like to our rates
Yep.
before I pull the trigger, but I think that's kind of my interpretation from it, from that perspective. I don't think we have the information to be able to do it within the context of this rate redesign, but long-term, I think we do. I would like to see us approach whether we have an hourly rates or whether we have weekend rates. I think in the winter, there could be a lot of logic for us in adopting a rate that applies after noon on Friday until noon on Sunday, and then different rates every other time of the week, or, you know, something like that, for the residential customers anyway. But I don't think I'm assuming that we don't have that ability now with the current adoption of AMI.
Again, those type of thoughts, I think, are relevant, and we can feed them into the process here. This is going to take us several months,
Yep.
and even if it only takes you 3 days, it's going to take several months, that regulated thing.
Yeah.
So my hope is that we get a confluence of when the smart meters are all installed to when we have this occur. So
We actually pull the
I
trigger
don't
on
think
it.
it's unreasonable for you to consider time of use rates or time of day, daily rates are really just a time of use rate.
Yeah,
in
it's
a
just
different.
over a different scale.
So I think that that's perfectly reasonable for you to consider now, and we could make that happen concurrent with kind of all the rest of the meters going in.
Now, I guess my question is, if you're over for 2 months, that kilowattage, but then it takes you 11 months to get off of it,
Yeah.
which I was on it.
She was on it, yeah. Personal experience.
Yeah.
I mean, and, yeah,
Why is it 2 months
triggering.
and then 11 months to get off?
Yeah. So the philosophy behind that is that when we see that type of demand, we as a utility have to go out and buy that as though you're going to do that all the time. And we pay for that. It would be really nice to not have that happen, right? That we could not trigger. I guess what a better way of me saying, or a way of me saying it, since I haven't said anything yet, is as we get to the level of vision into the data like we're doing with the smart meters versus regular meters, we can apply that to the overall utility as a whole. And instead of, dealing with something with a blunt object, we can actually look a little more closely at what it costs when, and to make decisions about when to buy power and when not to. That may help. It certainly could provide a rationale for why we don't need that 12 months anymore. But the way the 12-month thing was established was because once you hit it,
Yeah.
we have to buy it, and we have to buy it for a year, and that was the trigger.
And once the AMI meters are all installed, we'll have such a better concept of,
I think so, and
Yeah.
I also think that we can do better. We're starting, Michael and I have been having conversations with VEPSA about, okay, we get monthly reports on, it's an amazing spreadsheet, Michael's favorite spreadsheets. But it shows all of our power demand, what we paid for it, how much was transmission, how much was kilowatt hours, and also how much our portfolio of power generation produced, and what the costs were of that, or what the credits were of that, because we're getting credit for power that we buy into when we buy systems. And I think over the next year, I could easily see us refining that purchase power and what resources we have in our portfolio of energy to better match what our demand has been. So I think there are ways of improving that too. But what Logan said is exactly kind of what I was hoping to hear today, to figure out what we should show you. I don't know, do you two have other thoughts or the same thoughts, or
No, I think
agree
that's
with that?
And I think you have to, when you put your thoughts down and think about them, and I think we're kind of all on the same page, but what is that going to mean to people?
Right.
Because
There will be winners
when
and
you,
losers.
if you add all this together and divide it up by however many customers you have, that could have serious impact on the folks on the
Yeah.
bottom,
Right,
who probably have the less
exactly.
means to.
And that's where the art comes in, like, well, because I did the calculation already, I could tell you that, like, a monthly charge, all of our administrative costs divided evenly among everybody brings everybody to a $44 a month charge. That's where the art comes in. You say, that really isn't acceptable kind of for the smaller residences, whatever. And you say to me, I want to see that charge no higher than $20. And then I figure out, okay, then where does the rest of it go? And is that palatable to the commercial and industrial users that would be paying that charge? Or maybe we're looking at, some of them are paying $700 a month. They may not notice $703, but then the question is, why are they paying $700 a month for a customer service charge that the system really only costs us $44 a month, right? So all those type of questions are legitimate and should be answered. And we'll hopefully be able to answer them for you. But that philosophy of...
In the commercial rates, the same would apply.
Same
to them.
concept,
Right.
yep,
Same
same
concept.
thing.
Same type of
Same
thing.
concept.
And the
Yeah.
same issues. And there are a lot of customers, well, 150 of the commercial customers are on demand. Some are on ratchet and demand. So they, Magris is not seeing a change in their bill really, because it's high. It hit a high point and it's staying there. That's a function of the rate design.
Yeah, because of
Well,
its,
And it doesn't provide the feedback incentives they're looking for, which is very fair. It's like if they go out of their way to save electricity or be more efficient, why aren't they seeing that reflected in their bill?
yeah.
So before we leave, there's one other philosophical or policy discussion I wanted to have with you, and it's about low income. It's like, how much do you feel you want to assist with that, or do you feel like existing programs or the things I described before are enough, or how?
I think as we drill down, I think maybe some of the changes we make will make things more moderate and even. So then maybe it's not quite so much of an issue. And then my question is, when we look at that, how do you determine those folks? And that could,
That's the other.
that would not be an easy process. Doesn't mean we couldn't do it. I'm just saying you'd have to have some mechanism for determining, you know, who is, and how do you get those
Who's eligible,
numbers?
right.
And, you know, I'm sure it can be done.
Well, yeah, there's plenty of ways to look at that.
Well, there is, but there's
Yeah.
multiple families. It's just something that we'll have to talk about and decide how you determine that.
Probably looking at state programs if they are on, you know, free and reduced hot lunch, or if they're, you
We
know,
don't do that anymore because it's
Well,
universal school meals.
but if, you know,
Yeah,
those
similar
programs
But then you
that
have to
they're,
look at the residents in the house, and is it,
Yeah.
yeah, we can
Yeah.
have,
I mean, I
discuss that more.
think to your point, I think before too, I think on the idea that we are sort of already subsidizing the lower income folks just by keeping a low customer charge, where the customer charge theoretically should be higher, but we are in some ways keeping it at 20% of where it should be, subsidizes folks by not charging them quite as much for their power as, or not as much for the admin costs as they are otherwise, it otherwise costs administratively to have them,
Mhm.
is some way that we do that kind of on the whole. And I think I'm comfortable with that where it is now. I would look to, you know, I think you're the folks that are in the office and have these numbers, and, you know, I would welcome your own suggestions or advice. If you think that should be 15, you know, I'm open to you making a case for that. Yeah, I feel like I'm comfortable with it being 1080, where it's, if you think it, you know, on net, it would be about 50 otherwise. But yeah, I'm open to suggestions. I think to the customer charge for all these different comm rates, you know, I think there is a curiosity that I have, like if they've, you know, they were set however X many years ago, and then over the years, they've just gone up a percentage, whatever percentage of the rate case over time. Like, is that where they still should be? Yeah, I'd mostly look to Brett on that. Like,
Yeah.
is this what it costs to have a three-phase customer? Is this the amount that of work and effort it is for you to have them on our books? Should we be redesigning that? You know, should we be looking more at that on the whole? Yeah, I see like 20 different rates depending on if they own their own equipment before or after the meter. If, you know, they're three-phase, single-phase, net, you know, whatever it is, up to 15, customer-owned, you know, all these different rates. And like, it seems complicated. If there's a reason that it should be that complicated and it really does cost that much more to have this customer because they're a single phase and they're over 15, and this person's different because they're three-phase and under, like, yeah, that's fine, but do we need all that complexity for you?
Right, and I think that's I
Yeah.
think Brett and I should have further discussion
Yeah.
about what it really,
Yeah.
What it costs.
what it really
Tough.
costs for those different types
Yeah.
of customers.
right, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I know that it's complex and it seems like it's convoluted in ways that seem unnecessary to me as an outsider, but I'm an outsider. You guys, you do this every day. So I'd look to you like, this is your chance for us to help make your job easier if we can.
Yeah, it's that balance between precision and
Yeah.
administratively, you
Yeah.
know, able to do it.
Yeah.
Correct, yeah.
I feel sorry for the IT guy that has to write all the code to be able to execute this pricing structure.
He's over there.
You?
Well, hopefully it's easier than the one we have now.
You made us say,
Hopefully it is tomorrow, yeah.
Yeah, that's the whole idea.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But really, what that says is just simplicity. It really, you'll find back office efficiencies by just going as simple as you can. I look at all these rate structures and tariffs, and it's like, my God, it makes the conversion to the euro in Europe look like a
Cakewalk, yeah.
cakewalk compared to what you guys have to administer, and this is just a local utility.
Yeah, well, appreciate that comment,
Yeah.
and appreciate those thoughts, and we can, I think I've got a decent idea of the policy direction you guys kind of want to go in. We'll do some, this is when I get myself in trouble. I feel like we can turn these numbers around pretty quickly. He's not paying, good, he's not paying attention.
So,
No,
I have
I'm
a
always
question.
thinking ahead, breaking the cost out into the right categories by how they're being used.
Yeah.
I'm planning ahead here.
Okay, so my point being, like, I don't know how soon you'd want to meet again, but like if you wanted to do something, you have a regular scheduled meeting the end of the month. If you wanted to do something a couple of weeks after that, like offset, I think we'd be ready to have that conversation with you if you wanted.
is there a model someplace that makes sense to you that you've seen, or that Vespa maybe makes a suggestion?
Mhm.
I mean, we can't be the only utility
No.
trying to streamline some things.
Oh, you're not.
So-
Yes, I am looking, and I will get those to you. I'll get you
Okay.
some examples.
Okay.
I can tell you that there are five other utilities that use the demand, the residential demand rate. They're all experiencing this.
Okay,
And I can also tell you that the range of customer service charges ranges from where close to Swanton, I think, is at $8 for, and they're not recovering their costs there. We're not at 1080. There are some that go up to 25.
Yeah, I think I'd seen that
Yeah.
before.
I've seen some at 40. I guess an
I
example.
mean,
But
it would
we can
be-
get you those comparisons, and then you could, and that's helpful. But nobody has there's no one equation
okay,
or model that you'll be able to say, oh, I like that one, let's do that.
okay.
It's going to be picking a little bit from here and a little bit from there and seeing how the numbers sugar off. So that's, the art part of this is not insignificant in terms of decision-making.
Right. I like how you put that.
So really, it's a question of when you want to meet again. We'll figure our schedules to be able to make sure that we have the numbers, and probably, frankly, we'll do some of this in terms of load curves and things, so you can see if we change this and we get this type of penetration, what happens to our curves. And so you can get more, we can do more iterative stuff with a live presentation.
Yeah.
So
Makes sense.
our next meeting is the 26th, correct?
Yes. It's a regularly scheduled board meeting.
Yeah, so 2 weeks.
Do you
And
want to
you
spend
think- you
time
think-
doing that, doing this type of thing during that meeting, with knowing that it won't be quite this long, but,
I don't know.
or do you want to do it on a separate?
Feels like our meetings,
You can have
our
a
meetings are,
discussion on it. and-
we can have some discussion maybe. It seems like our meetings, we usually have a pretty full agenda for our monthly though.
Yeah.
Usually.
I don't know how much, maybe we'll play it by ear.
Well, do you want to, so if we have discussions in our monthly meeting, at that point, we can pick a date
Yeah. you can-
Yeah.
going forward,
Yeah, at least.
2 weeks, if we feel we're ready to
Yeah.
continue talking about that, yeah,
Yeah.
okay.
So,
So this topic should be on the agenda.
on the
Yeah.
Just on the
agenda.
agenda.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we'll do as much as we can between now and then, based on what I've heard here, and kind of, we'll do some presentation to you, and maybe it'll generate some more questions where you can say, yeah, I like that, go with that.
Yeah.
Right, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so,
Yeah, makes sense.
yeah,
Appreciate
I
your
appreciate
thoughts.
people coming.
Yes,
It was great to have people at this
absolutely.
meeting. We don't have a lot of guests.
we
Yeah,
don't.
it's-
We thought when we had to increase rates across the board that we would have more guests, but we still didn't really have guests.
Yeah, yeah.
And so,
Thanks for listening.
we
Well,
wanted you to talk to us.
thank you
I think
for,
they were well-deserved
Anyway.
rate increases though. I mean,
Yeah.
we're still
We
the
hope that we
cheapest in
made the
state.
case. Yeah, I
Yes,
mean,
we are.
we were all, obviously, we were all ratepayers too. Like, we didn't want to increase our own rates. We did only what we felt we had to do for the, sustainability of the utility. But,
Yeah.
Communication strategy is gonna be important too.
yeah,
Yeah.
It is,
You
you're
gotta
right.
Really think about that.
Absolutely.
appreciate that, yeah.
definitely,
Yeah.
appreciate
You
it.
want a job?
Sounds like he's got a job.
Beats Home Depot.
Might be able to afford to charge
You
your
might be
car.
able to afford the job. Anyway, I will,
Any other comments from citizens?
Thank you for all your hard work
Yeah,
for bringing
this is
this up because.
thanks. Yeah.
This
You know, we
issue's
can't
been here for a
complain to
long
Michael all the
time.
time.
Right?
Yeah,
Kathy and I talked, but then we talked with both accountants.
Right, and you've been in on other meetings too, correct?
Yeah, I just, not for a
Yeah,
while.
yeah, it's been a little while, but,
You were visited by folks that love spreadsheets,
Yeah.
is what I hear. Yeah, that's what I was.
Yeah.
yeah.
I'm a G
Used to
finance
this, I
guy, so I
retired.
apologize.
no, but it was
No,
nice to
it's-
hear from all of,
Yeah,
you know,
really was.
everyone, like,
It really was.
it's important to understand what we're working on and,
And I do think you really need to pay attention to the low-income people,
yeah,
because it's gonna be a shock for some.
yes.
Oh, yeah.
Unfortunately, I think.
Yeah, absolutely.
There's,
We are
there's
very
enough money in the
isolated.
town where
Yes.
you can make sure you don't hurt the wrong people.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
That's what we hope, yeah.
And, you know, maybe we're looking at like, are you a year-round resident? Are you a second homeowner? Are you, you
Well, there's a
know?
big difference between somebody that has a second home.
Yeah,
That's
there
good.
is.
Yeah.
And that's,
And there
how
are
rates
opportunities to
important.
distinguish that.
Yeah.
I paid more here for monthly electrical than
Yeah.
I do in Connecticut, like
Yeah.
by $200 a month.
That's
Wow.
on demand.
yeah,
Yeah.
Because you're on demand. Yeah, and we
yeah.
hope to fix that.
I think anyone on demand is paying more. I know New Jersey, New York.
What's your kilowatt hour cost down there?
I don't know, I think it was like a little bit of the last bill. Actually, it went down $20.
What do your storm charges go away?
Nah, my brother was up over Christmas, and I just think they probably had their kids, like, use every.
It was exactly what we were looking at.
Is that online? Someplace we can look at it?
This spreadsheet?
It is
I
not, but we
put
can
on
send
the
it to you.
website.
Yeah.
I think it's, yeah, it should be public because we've,
Well, it is
we have a
public.
copy.
Yep.
Yeah.
Information is power.
Yeah, the other question is the costs coming through you guys. How, where do they, you had mentioned on our last meeting, efficiency program, like where to go and what to look at. I've got those websites now that I look at regularly. How do those costs pass through?
Right.
If that's
So
something
you
can
were,
share, how-
so what Tom is referring to is he's looking at cost projections, power projections, regionally, nationally, where things going.
Also, they have the minute-to-minute, sorry to interrupt.
Yeah, they do.
They have it on.
Yeah, you could, it's like day trading for electric geeks. But you could look at that minute to minute and not do anything else in your life. I would recommend TikTok before you did that. But yes, the data is there to see the trends and to see their futures as well, their predictions about what's going on. As I'm trying to get data together for Magris, the estimate of power demand is pretty accurate. The estimate of power cost for that is woefully inadequate. I mean, it's been low. It's been not anywhere near where the realities have been. And the realities are based on electric generators offering their power, offering to produce at a particular time for a particular dollar. It's bidding into the ISO New England market, or if you're in New York, you know, you got a different power authority, but it's bidding those in. They accept, ISO accepts the number of generators based on the cost, cheapest to most expensive, for the amount of power they think they're gonna need. And then we all have either bought that in advance, or we go onto the market because we underestimated the amount of KWH we need, we buy it on that real market timeframe. And that's what you want to avoid. You want to avoid being in a winter day having to buy into that peak because you were short of your power. So you hedge your power by building a portfolio that accommodates as much toward 100% as you can, recognizing that power sometimes is cheaper to buy on the market. And so you don't necessarily want to lock yourself into 100% of everything you need all the time and overpay by
Yeah.
doing that. So it's that balance. But
Are you locked into buying from a certain provider?
we are, it's an interesting
That
thing.
gets back to Connecticut. I
Yes.
change
No.
my provider.
Right, you can do that. No,
Just go to the market and-
Vermont is the only state in New England that is still regulated,
Yeah.
meaning this territory, everybody who has electricity in this territory
It's
has to buy
regulated.
from us.
Has to, okay, right.
Yep. Someday you and I can go out for a cup of coffee and I'll tell you all the advantages of
How about
staying,
the loft, I'll buy you beer.
staying a regulated
It's close to
utility.
home.
Yeah.
I know it may sound crazy, but Vermont's decision to stay a regulated utility is one of the best things we have done. It lends for predictability. We can invest in 20-year contracts for something, or we
Yeah,
can
right.
invest in
Predictability.
building things, right? Whereas, forgive me, but in Connecticut, those guys are scraping for your, like, you could change electric utilities
So they give
tomorrow.
you teaser rates.
So they give you teaser rates, it's like buying into your TV, into your TV
Yeah,
subscriptions.
you give it $20 a month.
And,
You sign up for
and then
2
you get hit, or they don't invest in keeping things maintained because there's no incentive for them to do that.
Like the tree
Um,
services, things
Right,
like that.
The
that
incentive
makes
is to
sense.
have the lowest price and compete for your customers.
Yeah.
We're not competing for our customers, but we are competing to not have this room filled with 200 people because
Yeah.
the oxygen would get
Yeah.
low.
Yeah. Makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, yeah.
I will move to adjourn.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right. Adjourn this
Thanks,
meeting
everybody.
at
Thank you for coming.
3:15.